What's up guys, I'm Coach Highway from GameLeap, and to kick off our MW2 channel, we're going to get started by talking about which guns are the strongest in Modern Warfare 2. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe to see more MW2 and Warzone 2 content coming. To get this kicked off, we are going to sort the guns by category and do them one at a time from the worst to the best. And starting off with the assault rifles, we have the M16 in the C tier. It really doesn't have effective killing power with one burst, so you're oftentimes just going to end up getting outdueled by pretty much any gun above this tier. This puts it pretty solidly at the bottom of the assault rifle list, but not at the D tier where I find the truly awful weapons to be, as I still at least had some fun playing with it and managed to get a few high kill games. The next C tier assault rifle is going to be the Cast-Off 545. It trades off damage for nothing super tangible in return. If there was any gun that could handle losing a touch of damage, it would be the AK, but the fact that the gains from trading it are minimal with this thing mean I can't really justify it. Moving on up into the B tier for the assault rifles, we have the LACHMANN 556. This thing is a pretty good weapon. I enjoyed playing with it, but man, it felt just a bit too slow to actually pop off with consistently. The damage was good, the recoil was easy to control overall, but I felt myself having to adopt a much slower playstyle. This oftentimes got me rolled by the much more agile weapons, and it didn't really play too well on a lot of the close maps. Up into the A tier, we have the M4. This is the base starter weapon, and it is a really strong one. I remember before I got any attachments for it, it felt like I was on the weaker side, but once I got a few good pieces, it honestly felt hard to stop using it. It has great recoil, decent range, decent speed as well, and is overall just a super versatile weapon, which is obviously the intention since it's the starter gun. It still gets outdueled by our S tier pretty easily, but it is worth an A tier pick for sure. Our other A tier assault rifle is going to be the STB 556. This was a fun weapon for me to use, but it has a seriously sharp damage range fall off. Sometimes I felt like I'd get a kill immediately, and others I was left holding 7 hit markers and wondering why I started playing this game. That being said, it has great overall stats with easy to manage recoil, decent damage in those closer ranges, and it felt mobile enough that I wasn't slugging around. Either way, it's a decent early-ish weapon, and it's worthy of being in the A tier next to the M4. If you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to like and subscribe for more banger content. And moving on into our S tier, we have the real sauce of the assault rifle classes, starting with the Cast-Off 762. The jump in KDR I had when I picked this thing up as opposed to my previous M4 usage was immense. The TDK is ridiculously low, and I can assure that this thing is going to be a seriously meta pick. It hits like a truck, and it has a decent bit of recoil, but it's absolutely manageable with a tiny bit of practice. It feels quick enough to match my faster playstyle, and I think this thing is a must-try for anyone wanting to start rolling. Easily an S tier pick and my personal favorite. The next S tier assault rifle is going to be the TAQ-56. Compared to the Cast-Off 762, it has less recoil and a little higher TDK. In other words, it's much more manageable and accurate at the cost of that high damage the K762 offers. In fact, the recoil I felt with this weapon was nearly unnoticeable, and I was lasering people from really far away with it, making it super satisfying at range. I felt a bit slower with this thing than I would like, which is why it wasn't my personal favorite choice, but I cannot deny that this thing absolutely does rival the K762. Our final S tier assault rifle is going to be the Cast-Off 74U. Honestly, this thing feels really fast for an assault rifle. Even though my preferred weapon was the K762, I think I may have actually done better with this weapon. It has high damage, high recoil, high mobility. This thing is super flexible, and I see a lot of stomping done by those that main it. It's definitely worth a shot due to its insane versatility. I don't really know if there's anything wrong with it right now. Also, when I was doing a bit of research for this video, I saw that there were a couple of competitive leagues that were straight up agreeing to ban this weapon. That has to speak for its power somehow, right? Moving on into our battle rifles, we start off at the bottom of the barrel D tier with the SO14. Good lord, this weapon tested my sanity. This is one of the worst weapons I've ever used in COD. You feel beyond slow with it, and you have no power to make up for it. I could hardly stand to play for many games with it, and in fact I actually had to take a break every couple games to use one of those cast-offs to remind myself I'm not terrible. If you want to main this gun, then Godspeed to you, but I really think that this is a D tier weapon. For our C tier, we have the TAQ-V. This thing is just kind of bad. Its recoil is pretty insane for full auto, and the semi-automatic is pretty mundane as well. There's not much that makes me excited about using this weapon, and I think the stats are just too poor to consistently outgun people. And it sucks because I have always been a fan of the SCAR weapons. The battle rifles are now going to cap here at the B tier sadly, and the first one that we have is the LACHMANN 762. It's pretty good at holding angles due to its insanely high damage. It's not super mobile or fast by any means though, especially if you lean into that high damage aspect with your attachments. So while it has a really strong TDK and can be used effectively, I'm leaving it at the B tier due to its lack of versatility. I do think that this was my favorite BR though. Our final battle rifle is the FTAC Recon, which is going to sit here at the B tier. Once you level it and start kitting it out, it actually is pretty solid for long range engagements. I still don't think there's any particular reason to use it over the higher tier picks, and it's a real pain to level up from the base. This leaves it stuck at the B tier for me. Moving on to the SMGs, we have our beginning C tier SMG, the PDSW 528. This was one of the earlier SMGs you could use, and honestly it just felt like utter trash. It does such little damage, there wasn't really a reason to use it over the other earlier unlock, the Vel 46, which we'll get to. I do like P90s, but this one just ain't it, chief. C tier, sucks bad. At least it wasn't the SO14 though. Up and over to the B tier, we have our first SMG, the Vel 46. As mentioned before, the Vel 46 is pretty much the starter SMG, and I think it's actually pretty solid. It's easy to control and has an okay TDK, I just felt that it was inconsistent at times. You could absolutely chalk it up to a skill issue, as you can with anything of this nature, but I genuinely just felt like unless I was very close range, it was a coin flip whether or not the Vel wanted to give me a kill or a bunch of hit markers. It's still solid in any case and will serve you well, especially as you get some attachments for it. Next on our B tier, we have the Mini Back. The stats are decent, the extra ammo is obviously worth mentioning, and it's all around a viable gun. The only reason it's at B tier is because its competitors are just stronger in general than it is. It doesn't pack enough punch for me at times, which is a massive selling point on SMGs. It kinda sucks too because I've always liked the PP BRYSON in games of the past. Our final B tier SMG is going to be the MX9. It honestly feels pretty nice to use, it's not very difficult by any measure, so if you're a beginner this is a great gun for you, but it just didn't wow me. The damage was kind of weak and it felt slower than I would like for an SMG. It still felt competent enough to get high kill games with, so I'm just gonna leave it at the B tier for now. Moving into the A tier, we have the Fennec 45. This resembles the old Vector and it has a very high fire rate and thus a fast TDK. I really enjoyed this weapon, and once you get used to the high fire rate, you can absolutely destroy at close range. With that being said, the mid to long range can be a struggle due to its sharp drop off. It's got a pretty high skill floor, but I personally love it and I think it's worth the learning curve. Next up we have the FSS Hurricane. I built this weapon probably 100 different ways and enjoyed pretty much all of them. The default magazine has 50 rounds and it's a solid all around weapon with tons of versatility. I give this weapon an easy A tier. It's not as good as the SMGs at the S tier, but it's still good all the same and worth a shot. Moving on up into our S tier, we have the LACHMANN MP. Looks pretty much like an MP5 and it feels so much fun to use. I feel pretty strong with it, landing quick kills up close, and I rarely ever get outgunned when I'm running this SMG. It deserves a very solid spot in the S tier and it doesn't have any weaknesses. Our final SMG is going to be the Vaznes 9K, and wow, this thing is ridiculous. I thought the LACHMANN had a great TDK. I feel like somehow this one is even faster. This weapon will make you feel like you're zooming around the map with how quick you can run with this thing. It has great attachments and you feel a bit like a raid boss in close range when you get good with it. It's likely the top SMG right now. Moving on into our LMGs, and as per usual with COD, I think most of these things are pretty bad. Nonetheless, let's start with number 1, the Socken MG38 at the C tier. I actually kind of liked playing with this thing. The low recoil and high damage was pretty awesome once I kitted it out, but at the end of the day, it was still just so slow. It left me dying to the faster metaguns way more often than I would like. I have this sneaking suspicion that I may be underrating this one with a C tier, but time will tell. My next C tier LMG is going to be the RAAL. Way too slow to be effective. You can maybe hold an angle with it and have it be alright, but it's just not my playstyle and honestly a suboptimal way to play in general. Up on the B tier, we have the 5.56 ICARUS. This feels like the much more mobile LMG. It feels alright, but as is the case with a lot of the ratings I give on guns like this, I don't really see why you wouldn't use one of the better alternatives. It's great and all, but not worth anything above a B tier for now. Next on our B tier is the HCR 5.6. I don't have a ton to say. It feels pretty okay in every department, but it didn't stick out anywhere to me, and it felt pretty bland to play with, so I'm just gonna leave it at the B tier. Our next LMG is the RAP H, and it still remains on the B tier. This thing is so slow, but it has a ton of damage and it's super easy to use. The fast fire rate is a pretty appealing and very satisfying element of it, and it seems like it's one of the better of the LMG class, but that's really not that much of an accomplishment. Our final LMG is the RPK, and I am putting it at the A tier. Once you fully kit the attachments out, you can actually make this thing pretty good. I still wouldn't say as good as the S tier weapons, but honestly it's not too shabby. If I had to play with an LMG, it'd probably be this one. I'd give it a solid A tier. Moving on into our shotgun category, we have for starters the BRYSON 800 at the C tier. It's simply worse than the alternatives. There's not a whole lot to say about shotguns because you can use any of them and get kills, but they're really a class that have the least amount of variance between them all, so you're just better off using the Lockwood. Next up is the BRYSON 890, which is still at the C tier, and it's a slight jump up in power from the BRYSON 800 in terms of potential, but I think that it's ultimately the same situation, just use one of the better shotguns. And speaking of, let's move on up into our B tier where we have first the EXPEDITE 12. It's got a reliable one-hit kill at its range, and this doesn't really play into my rating, but it does look pretty sick. It definitely is a potent close-range tool, and obviously is terrible at anything beyond that, and it's reliable. Our final shotgun is going to be the LOCKWOOD 300, and it rests at the top of the shotgun class in the A tier. This thing is unreal with how reliable it is. It honestly knocks everything out in its range, and if I'm being honest, it does feel pretty fun to use. I really love this weapon and think it's subjectively the best shotgun, 100% worth using and trying, and it's A tier with certainty. Moving on into the snipers, we have our first C tier, the LAB330. It's not bad I guess, but I get hit markers non-stop with it. It has tons of potential and feels fine to use. I just think there are significantly better options in this class, and thus it lands at the C tier for me. Moving into our B tier, we have the SPX-80. The ADS on this thing is really nice, and it acts in all the ways you'd expect a sniper to. I don't think it's the best one, especially since I still sometimes get hit markers with it when I shouldn't, but it's a great weapon all the same. Our next B tier sniper is going to be the MCPR-300. This is one of the two snipers where I feel like I get very few hit markers with. The only reason it stays at the B tier is because the last sniper has a better fire rate than this one does, meaning it simply gets outperformed. And our final sniper is the S tier Signal 50. I feel like this thing is much stronger than the rest of its class by a pretty big margin. It has a great fire rate, it handles surprisingly well, and the damage is fantastic. I can remember maybe 1 or 2 hit markers with this thing, and that makes it an excellent sniper by all accounts in my book. Super strong, worth using over the others in pretty much any situation. S tier. Our final category is going to be the marksman rifles, and to start us off, we have the D tier LMS. I thought that I wouldn't find a weapon worse than the SO14 when I started this list. I was wrong. Just use a sniper instead of this piece of garbage or even any of the other marksman rifles. It's got hit markers, slowness, and it's overall boring. D tier for sure. Moving into the C tier, we have the EBR-14. Honestly, it's still kind of terrible, but I win with it sometimes. I just can't leave it as bad as the SO14 or the LMS, so it's C tier. Moving into the A tier, we have the TAC-M. It may be just because I come from a background of using two-shot weapons like this, but I absolutely love this thing. It's so much fun to use, and if you have a quick follow-up shot, you can land 2 taps insanely quick and leave enemies surprised. It's got super solid attachments to come with it, and I loved it from the ground up. Easy A tier pick for me. Another A tier weapon we have is the SAB-50. It's pretty good, fairly fast ADS, and it feels powerful whenever I'm using it. I love this weapon as well, but there seems to definitely be a stronger alternative to it coming up. My final A tier weapon is going to be the LOCKWOOD MK2. I think this weapon is a machine. It's super punishing, as if you miss your shots, it's an L, but it one-shots very consistently and is super mobile with the right attachments. This thing feels like a streak machine, since if your aim is on, you can run around and pretty much smoke everybody. It's definitely worth using if you're somebody who prides themselves on their aim, just don't be shocked if it humbles you. Our final marksman rifle is in the S tier, and that would be the SPR-208. It's high damage, super fast ADS, and it overall just feels like the best in its class. I liked using it, maybe not as much as the Lockwood, but I think it's far better than the Lockwood is, which makes me leave it in the S tier. That's going to be it for today's video, guys. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content, and let me know what you would change in this list down below. I'll see you all again very soon. Take care and peace.